All right, 7:13. Welcome into Wingin' It Wednesday. How's everyone surviving the lack of sunlight this morning getting in?
In the middle of the night, yes.
Well, the problem is that, Warren comes in, he bangs on our window. You know how I know it was daylight saving time? Because he banged on 2 studios down. He walked to the wrong window and banged on those guys, and they said, "We don't know who you are, old man. Get out of here." Anyway, but we claimed him, we found him, we rescued him, and gave him a dry shirt and everything. So he's here, Carol's here, and Stafford Barnett here. All right, so yesterday the big news that happened right in the middle while I was doing a commercial. As I was reading, I glance up, and I see the flashes and the strobe lights. Rex Tillerson gone. Stafford, we'll start with you on this one. Come on around the table this morning. Your thoughts on the new appointed, nominated Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo.
I thought it was crazy timing during the election in Pennsylvania. I think that Rick Santorum said it best, that it may have cost Saccone the election up there. They did the numbers on the turnover in the White House, and apparently it's higher than McDonald's. They're at like 47%. McDonald's is at 44%. And they're saying there's more to come. So they're thinking that Sessions and Kelly will probably be out. So it's a wild time if you're working in the White House, and they keep saying that they attract the best people, but they have 42 open spots right now for ambassadors. They've got no nominations for. So, I mean, I hope that they can find some stability there. I mean, look, I want them to do a good job. And I hope that they do a good job. And it seems like, God forbid you say that the Russians murdered somebody in Britain, because that apparently is the final straw. So, Warren?
Yeah, I disagree with the stuff about there being chaos in the White House and all of that stuff. You always have these big turnovers when you change course drastically, whether it's with a corporation or anything. And especially something as large and as magnanimous as this deal is, with going to Washington and trying to redirect the course of the federal government. And, if you go back to the days of Ronald Reagan and look at the turnover rate he had in that White House, I mean, and that's, people were all saying the same thing. Rex Tillerson, he needed to go. I go back to what James A. Baker III said. Baker, was Gerald Ford's chief of staff. He was Baker and Bott's multimillionaire law firm. Gerald Ford's chief of staff, Ronald Reagan, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, chief of staff, George H.W. Bush's chief of staff, secretary, whatever. And he said one time that I told everybody when I was in Washington, all of the staff and all that, just remember one thing: you're staff. Nobody elected us to anything. Your job is to carry out policy that president sets, and that's your only job. Your job is not to make policy. And here you had Tillerson going out there and just boldly contradicting a lot of things that Trump said. This is what I want to do. Tillerson goes out there and says kind of right the opposite. And, and so you can't do that. You got to go. You're either going to be on the team or you're not. Now, I do understand this. It must be really, really difficult to come from being the chairman of the board of one of the largest companies in the world with all of that power and go from that to being staff. The same thing happened to Don Regan when he was with Reagan. He was Reagan's Reagan's Secretary of the Treasury. Then he was the last chief of staff they had. Well, he got fired. And as he said, he didn't know he got fired. He saw it on television. Well, that happens in that ball game. You got these leaks and all that. On the other hand, how many times did Tillerson, when he was coming through the ranks of Exxon, did people get laid off, get terminated or whatever, and they found out on the street before they even got to work? And it happens all the time. Point. So, look, it happens to you. So you're a big boy. Just say, well, I'm gone. Have a nice day.
Carol, it seems like the Iran deal might have been one of the straws that broke the camel's back. President Trump was pretty clear in his statement yesterday to the press as he was walking out, that they really thought differently about this. And
they thought differently about a lot of things. I think, I don't know why Trump appointed him, to be honest with you. I mean, he does have connections all over the world. I mean, he was a, global player on the economic scene. But it was apparent very quickly that he didn't agree with his boss on a whole lot of things, including the Paris Climate Accords. The big thing was the Iran deal, that he was working with the European allies to keep the Iran deal in place when the president said, no, we want to take another look at this deal because we got screwed on this deal. We gave away over $1 billion, well over $1 billion to Iran. How many billion did we give? 140 billion? I mean, I don't remember. It was incredible. It was an incredible amount, and it was stupid. It was a stupid deal. We got nothing in return. So anyway, it wasn't a hostage exchange, but of course we didn't let the hostages off the plane until we got the cash in hand, right? So, they disagreed on some fundamental issues, and I do believe he knew, and that is why he cut his Africa trip short. I believe Kelly did tell him, this is coming down, you might want to come back here, and so I think he knew in advance. This whole thing about, he didn't find out until, I don't believe that's true. I think Kelly let him know.
All right, let's move on to what's happening today in Acadiana and across the country. As today is the school walkout planned across the country, Lafayette Parish really caught in the crosshairs. It first announced it would kind of facilitate the walkout, then the school board voted to allow a moment of silence instead. Some say this could eventually be a constitutional issue. Warren, what are your thoughts on it? Looks like it's going to happen here at 10 a.m. What's the deal?
I think that the role of schools is to educate students and not have them turning out for protests and such stuff. I go back a few years ago that the chancellor of LSU let school out for them to go protest at the state capitol over budget cuts for higher education or whatever. And I said that day that chancellor should have been fired within 10 minutes from the time that he made that statement and let them out. If you want to protest and all that, there's a time and place to do it. And letting them out of school to go do that, walking out of school or whatever is not the way to do it. And, it's a highly charged emotional issue, but I just think it's wrong whenever you do that. So, my point is they need to be in school, they need to be learning how to use correct grammar, they need to be learning the numbers and how to add, multiply, divide. And I think that really one of the things that we need to learn discipline, and we need to learn grammar in schools. That's two things that have seemed to just vanish, just like a puff of smoke over the last few decades.
The famous 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Reading, writing, and arithmetic.
So is that spelling? What's that spelling?
Carol, what do you
like pi r squared.
It is Pi Day.
Pi Day, yes.
It is Pi Day. Math was not my strong suit, I can promise you that. Well, of course, this was kind of interesting because the superintendent at first said this was sort of going to be a formal thing, that they were going to let the kids do this and all. School board came back and said, no, we'll let them have a moment of silence, but if they want to do it, they can, because, of course, immediately the ACLU weighed in and said, this is a First Amendment right. Well, it is a free speech right to a degree, but you have certain restrictions. For instance, there's a safety issue here. There's a liability issue here. There's a disruption issue here. Who's going to monitor these kids when they walk out? So I think the school board was right to say, okay, we'll do a moment of silence. We're not going to stop any kids from going out, but it's not going to be a formal policy, because then what happens? Liability kicks in. If anything goes wrong, then they're liable. So they had to think of it from a legal standpoint as well as a free speech standpoint. So that's kind of a tricky line that they're walking there. I think they did the right thing, saying, okay, you want to have a moment of silence, fine. If you want to walk out, we're not going to stop you. But I'd still wonder about the disruption to the classes, the decorum, the safety, and the liability on the part of the school board.
So Stafford, you have young kids. They're older than mine, but they're younger. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we hear over and over is, kids paying attention to the news, knowing what's going on. Yeah. Did this whole thing really put it straight in their face? Because permission slips started going out. Things like that started happening. Is that kind of counterproductive to the whole, maybe our kids don't need to know about all this stuff?
It's a really tough time. When you talk to my kids aren't at the age where I've had to explain to them what a school shooting is yet, or what to do or any of that stuff. And you sit there and go, what is the age? And really, I think you and I's generation was one of the last ones to get through school without practicing for live shooter drills, right?
Yep. I mean, Columbine happened, but we didn't. It was so rare. Right. It was such an outlier. We never had drills for that.
Yeah, I think that the school board may have made a mistake with this one. When we mentioned the safety and liability and everything else, we should talk about the safety and liability. What happens when you have somebody there with a gun, right? And we have had a shooting in Lafayette in the past. So our community is not immune from this. I think it's important to note a couple things. The survivors who are getting out and talking about this are young, right? They're 16 and 17 years old, and I don't see them stopping, right? They're going to continue to go out and say we don't want to be shot at anymore. They're going to say a lot of things, right? And they're going to be voters, and they're going to energize people their age, because we keep, every time one of these things happens, we say now is not the time to talk about it. We say a lot of things, and nothing ever really happens. And while I don't necessarily support more gun control, I do realize that these kids are all going to be voters one day. And while we're teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, we should also be teaching civics. So if these kids want to get out and walk out of their classrooms into a common area at school to remember the kids that were murdered there, and we just had a memorial in Washington yesterday where they put 7,000 pairs of shoes for all the kids who've been shot since Columbine, mind you, not in school, but all the kids who've died at the hands of gun violence. Another thing to think about as well is post Newton massacre, Mothers Demand Action was created, and not a lot of people talk about those guys, but they have 100,000 members. Mothers Against Drunk Driving has 50,000 members, and so I think it's important that if you support the Second Amendment and you support the NRA, that you be willing to have a conversation instead of saying now's not the time, or have a conversation about gun control or whatever it is, because if you don't give it up, or if you don't be willing to talk or move on this stuff a little bit, these people are voting, and they're going to be voting quick.
So, seems like this is the week where the theme is Secretaries of State. Our own Tom Shetler, kind of out of public view after a lawsuit over sexual harassment was filed. The governor's office yesterday telling Bernie and myself that things are being looked at. How do they go forward? Shetler with his family and everything else. So we'll get to that next on Wingin' It Wednesday. It's 7:28, tackling the week's biggest stories with our panelists. So Secretary of State Tom Shetler remains out of the public eye after the harassment lawsuit. In light of recent allegations, different industries, can he go on as Secretary of State? Carol, we'll kick this one off with you, ma'am.
Oh, great.
What do you think?
What I think? I hate these kinds of stories because apparently this went on for years before she decided to file. I'm sorry. If somebody, look, it was obviously a consensual relationship for a long time. Something went wrong. Now she's filing against him. At this point in time, it's a he said, she said. Now she has a lot of evidence, obviously, and it does not look good for Mr. Shetler. I'm not going to condone anything like that. But, I mean, why so long? Obviously it was consensual for a long, long time, or you would have come after him way before this. So, what happened to aggravate her? What, she got demoted? She got stuck into an office she wasn't happy about? What, who knows? The relationship ended. She wasn't happy. That's why you really have a problem when you get into these kind of workplace relationships. It always, most of the time, it doesn't end well. Let me just say that.
Sometimes one of the two leaves. Then everyone lives happily ever after.
Yeah, but
you can't stay.
Well, yeah. Eventually, I think this is all going to come out in the wash. But I thought it was funny when the reporters were trailing all of the statewide elected officials who were on the dais yesterday and asking them, well, what do you think about Tom Shetler? He's the only one not here. What do you think about Tom Shetler? Man, they made for the elevators as fast as they could. Now, most of it, Billy Nungesser, Jim Donlin, they all said, well, we have to wait and let it play out and all that. I mean, nobody wants to throw a guy out of office. Here's the sad part. Tom Shetler has done an outstanding job as Secretary of State by all accounts. I mean, we have really model elections in this state.
That's what I'm saying. We talk to him every time elections happen and hear about the
And let me tell
successes.
You, on the commercial side, he runs a heck of a department on the commercial side. I've had to register trademarks and I've, registered corporate registrations and all. They do a heck of a job. He runs a good department. So that would be a sad thing, to lose him from that perspective. If he did something wrong, he's got to go. And I don't want to be paying, as a taxpayer, I'm sick of paying legal fees for all these miscreants. I'm just sick of paying legal fees for this.
All right.
I don't want to see us pay any more legal fees for this kind of shenanigans.
Stafford, so does performance on the job right there play into this anyway?
I think that the Secretary of State's been well run for a while. I think it was well run before Tom. Look, we're living a different world than we lived in 2 years ago. And we could say the same thing about 20 years ago. I mean, 15 years ago, we were telling bosses, hey, sexual harassment's a thing now. You can't demote or promote anybody based on a relationship or dangle that relationship in front of them. And then most companies put in a clause saying you can't date somebody subordinate to you. Okay? And just because of this, because at that point it becomes impossible to discipline, right? This guy should have known better. Simple as that. And the time that we're living in, there's just no way for him to go, for it to not have some pretty serious repercussions. Some say the Me Too movement's gone too far, that there's not a lot of due process with it, and there are times where I certainly agree. That being said, an elected official, we just had a special election in Pennsylvania because an elected official was cheating on his wife, right? This is something that you just don't do. I mean, it blows me away how dumb men will get at times to act on their most basic of instincts, right? All he had to do is not sleep with her, right? Not have this relationship. Stay loyal to his wife. All he had to do was those things, and he wouldn't be in this situation. But instead, and listen to the advice of everybody out there, don't sleep with a subordinate. Certainly don't try to demote them after you slept with them or after you broke it off, whatever it is, or if you broke it off when you slept with them, right? So my point is, he should have known better. He's a grown man. This is very, very simple. It's 101. If he goes, it's by his own volition. That's his fault.
Warren, your thoughts about breaking it off?
I won't touch that, but when I was a young lad of about 15 or 16.
Oh, yes. Get ready.
Oh, yeah, baby. Here comes
I thought you said you were going to touch breaking it off.
My father was actually born in 1902. His sister was over at the house, and she was talking about just how awful the world has gotten and how these kids were so out of control and the things they were doing, and just on and on and on. And she said, and you know that they didn't do that when we were young. And my daddy said, oh, good God Almighty. He said, it's the same thing's been going on since the world started, just a different group doing it. And then he started lining out these people that went to school with them in a little one-room schoolhouse, and which girls got pregnant at 15, and, you know, and then the guy who shot the other one in the seat of the britches jumping out of his hayloft when he caught him with his wife, and just run on down the line. And, you know, these things about,
haylofts and,
you know, businesses used to have, a lot of them had rules against, romances inside the company, and then that became kind of a taboo, you know, where we are women and we got the same right that men have, and blah blah blah. You can't tell me who I can and can't date, and on and on, you know. And so, well, okay, so we relaxed a lot of those rules. And, you know, Stafford brings up a good point about the guy and the subordinate, you know. My God, you go back to World War II, you had a 5-star general named Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the future president of the United States, was going with his Jeep driver, or his car driver, who happened to be a staff sergeant. What's a female? And, in fact, the rumor had it that, not the rumor, but the fact is that he actually wrote a letter to George Marshall, who was the chief of staff of the Army, and told him he wanted to get a divorce from Mamie and marry this gal. And Marshall told him under no circumstance that you will resign your commission first, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, you know, look, these things have been going on. You know, Bill Clinton wasn't the first one, and he's certainly not going to be the last one. And
Grover Cleveland, anybody?
Well, poor old Grover. But, you know, Grover, no, look, now you bring up a good point. You know, that Grover supposedly, that Grover claimed that he was the father of this child because he was the only one who wasn't married out of the 5 men who were going with one woman. And so when he ran for, when he ran for president, then he got beat, then he came back 4 years later and he ran again. Well, they had a cartoon going around that said the little kid was saying something about, where's your pa? And that was about Grover, you know, asking the kid. And the next cartoon that came out when Grover got elected says, where's your pa going to the White House? Ha, ha, ha.
Oh, my God.
So Grover and them bridged that gap. Somebody said that Bill Clinton took adultery off the table in politics way back then. And, you know, right now it's kind of like the gun control issue. Sexual harassment has once again
Okay.
reared its ugly head, and so
I want to bring up one thing, and I'm interested in you guys kind of weighing in. I hadn't even planned on this, obviously, because it would have been another thing.
Obviously.
But I didn't plan for any of this. Anyway, so you mentioned about the Me Too movement and some who thinks it's gone too far. Bernie and I were having this conversation about the ultimate Teflon in this whole Me Too thing is Ryan Seacrest. Everyone else, their careers have tanked just on the accusation. There are the accusations that won't go away against him, and it's almost like a lot of people don't even believe it. Why is that? You know, he's the American. You're out of this one then, Maureen, if you don't know. But I'm just saying, he's on American Idol. I mean, he's on a very high-profile morning show with Kelly Ripa. I mean,
well, I don't watch any of the morning shows.
Yeah. Well, he got avoided pretty heavily at the Grammys.
Yeah,
right?
people didn't talk to him.
I think the ultimate Teflon, if we want to be real about it, is Mike Pence, who won't be in another room with a woman unless his wife's there, right? And look, I'll be the first one to say it. I made fun of that guy when I heard that, and then. Now I kind of understand why. Look, the biggest mistake Tom Shetler made.
But Mike Pence never had any accusations against him.
He never got an opportunity.
Good.
Listen,
yes. All right. I pinned it all together.
Tom's biggest mistake was that he didn't have his lawyer pay her $130,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement. If he'd have done that, they could have just swept this under the rug.
But that doesn't always hold true. Because a lot of times people get paid, they will come back and say, I want more money.
Jennifer Flowers.
Just look at former Speaker of the House, Denny Hassert.
Yeah.
How much did he pay that kid? $4 million over the course of years?
That was really bad.
He should have been shot.
Yeah, because that was disgusting.
Let's not blame the victim in that one. I mean, that guy was a pedophile.
He was.
It goes on and on. Mel Reynolds.
Okay, so I just wanted to get you guys' input. Obviously, there's a lot of it, so thank you guys.
Yeah, by the way, newsflash, Donald Trump loves beautiful women. Hey.
That story's nowhere near done.
I think you hit on something. Expectations have a lot to do with it.
Different things, yeah. All right, 7:38. Going to come back with more Wingin' It Wednesday next. 7:45.
We are bad.
Y'all about to run out my music bed with all this excitement in here. So the regular
Warren's fault.
You know what? Right. Warren was actually very tame on that. He made no jokes, no double entendre, nothing. I'm proud of you, sir.
Lord knows he tried.
Sure, that was pretty hard.
Yeah. Thank you, Stafford Barnett.
Self-control.
All right. So the regular session is now well underway. Today is day 3. Lawmakers are going to be taking a rare look at gaming in the state as a way to shore up the budget gap. Back in 2016, we had a story here on KPEL where the state was actually not collecting some of the revenue from these gaming outfits. Stafford, the baton has been passed to you to start this segment. What do you think? Is this something we need to look for? How should we reform this?
We've already looked at it. The citizens of every parish have voted on this. Lafayette said no. Other places said yes. The places that did have put some casinos up, and really the places that have performed the best are in the areas next to Texas where gaming is illegal. And if you look at the flight of cars coming in every Friday evening to Coshada and all the casinos over there, which that's 210 bridge being worked on is supposed to do nothing but help Isla Capri, right? So that's coming as well. They have a helipad on top of both those new casinos because helicopters fly in high rollers all the time. I said it last week, and I think it was gaining traction before I brought it up, but we have got a broken system. And Jay Darden came out and said I think he said it yesterday, that if you want to cut your way out of this, show us where to cut and start cutting. Otherwise, they've got to figure out. The reality is this is laziness, right? We've known that this was coming since we passed a temporary 1-cent sales tax and all the other measures that we did to increase revenues to the state. So I'll say it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. You're there to do the hard jobs. You're not there to do the easy ones. And maybe the hard one is a constitutional convention and changing the way that we raise funds in the state. So they've got to fix it. I don't think gaming is the way to go. I think that gaming not on the Texas border tends to pull, like in situations like Baton Rouge, tends to pull more money from the locals than it does from out of state. And when you do that, you end up with some gambling addiction problems, and there's some crime that follows as well. So I do not support it.
All right, Warren.
You know, the first thing I want to say about the gambling deal, and let's just tell it like it is. It's gambling. It's not gaming. But except for video poker, I said, when you gamble, you at least have a shot at winning. And with video poker, you don't have a shot at winning, so it is gaming. You just go there and spend your money. But this keeps coming up a lot of times about, well, when this thing first came out, that all that money was supposed to go to education. And that is not true. The guy who was in charge of the committee that the gambling bill went through said that they specifically did not earmark it for education because they went to some of these other states, and they told them don't do that because if you do, then anytime you want more money for education, they're just going to balk and say, nope, you got all the gambling money, we're not giving you any more. So with that being said, Jay Darden says, show us where to cut. By God, Jay Darden, open up that damn budget and I'll show you where to cut. First place we want to cut is your salary. Now let's go from there. I've heard the damn line come out of these people over and over and over. Show us where to cut. Do you want to take that kid off the respirator? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to throw your grandmother over the cliff in a wheelchair? Is that what you want to do? No, by God, let's open up that budget and we can show you 1,000,000 places to cut, and we're going to improve service.
Sounds kind of like casket sales.
What?
You sure you want to bury them? Everything they gave to you your whole life? You sure you want to put them in just a simple box?
No.
They deserve more than that.
Don't want to put them in a simple box. We want to put them in that cardboard box and send them to the crematorium.
Oh, God.
And save that $36,000. So that's what they're going to do with me. And that, but it's the same old thing. They come up all this time. Well, if you don't do this, then the whole world's going to hell. If Stafford says, well, we knew this was coming when the 1 cent sales tax. No, we knew it was coming for the last 15 years because it comes every damn year. Every time they come up with these smoke and mirrors. Okay, we have a balanced budget. And everybody from those kindergarten kids who are going to go protest today on up to the people that are actually older than me knows that the budget will not be balanced. It won't make it through mid-year, and then they're going to be coming back and hollering, we're going to budget cuts. We're at the financial cliff. Oh, blah, blah, and it's your fault. If you need to give us more money, and you won't have this problem. And I say, Jay Darden, show me the budget, and I'll show you where to cut.
So, Carol, it seems as if there's a lot of money to be made out of a budget that's not balanced. So what's the motivation?
One of my favorite words is kind of tricky. It's anthropomorphizing, right? So you're endowing human qualities to a constitution.
Okay,
and you're saying the Constitution is the problem. No, you can have the greatest Constitution in the world, but if the people are screwed up who are trying to implement that Constitution, well, and as C.B. Ferguson has said, they have a lot more power over the money than they're willing to let on. They keep claiming that we can only cut this, we can only cut that. They have a lot more power. And by the way, if you went to first of all, we don't have zero-based budgeting, so every time they add on that, they'll spend all the money before the end of the year so they can come back and say, I need 10% more or whatever. If a department can't cut 10%, if every department could not cut 10%, shame on them. Another thing is the transfer of $5 billion annually from the state to the local governments to do things that the local government should be doing. Then you have the millions and millions spent on non-governmental organizations that some of them provide services, some of them do not. We don't take a hard look at where we're spending our money now. There's a lot of waste in that budget. And to keep going back to hospitals and higher ed, to go to the high-profile things as when my husband was in there, it was we're going to shut off the dialysis machines. Nobody's going to shut off the dialysis machines. That is a specious argument. There are ways to cut the budget right now. If you open this thing up totally, as Paige Cortez wants to do, a total constitutional convention, you're not going to be in any better shape than you are right now because, unfortunately, it's going to be people working that constitutional convention. It's going to be a lot of legislators, probably. You may have some elected people that was a mix the last time in the 70s. And look what we have now. Now, maybe a focused constitutional convention on just those articles. I think it's Article 3, 4, 5, something like that deal with the specific areas of the budget that can be fixed. I think we can do that. But there is no will. And by the way, when the governor keeps saying that these guys are just, they're just trying to make me look bad, or his allies say they're just doing this, they're listening to their constituents, and their constituents are telling them, we're tired of these shenanigans. We're going to have a sixth special session at the end. They're going to end this one soon because really the only big deal now is the budget.
All right, we have about a minute left in the show. We're going to go through each of you guys one time. I want to hear the one thing you think needs to be cut, either totally or in large part, to fix this. Stafford.
The homestead exemption.
Warren.
I can't point to just one thing, but I would just like to do a across-the-board cut.
10% from everyone?
By the way, the budget is open.
Carol? What's the biggest waste?
The biggest waste is the money we spend on politicians who will not do the hard decisions.
So you think salaries? Just their salaries?
$60K a day for a special session that got us
Sounds
nothing.
Like a radio promotion. $60K a day, guys!
Yeah, your minimum daily requirement every time you go into session.
Hey guys, if off topic, if you were part of the Cajun Navy, they're doing a training this week in the Atchafalaya Basin.
Cool.
Hurricane season's coming up. If you get a chance to go check it out, go check it out.
All right, and go Cajuns. Thanks, guys, for coming in. Wingin' Wednesday
Cajuns.
each and every
Big
day.
Go Cajuns, yes.
Each and every week here on News Talk 96.5 KPEL.